How come you don't want me, man?
He was Uncle Phil, the father figure in the hearts of millions of Americans. He was the pillar, the very soul that made The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air a television legend. But on the final day of 2013, James Avery passed away. The news stunned Hollywood. Fans wept. Colleagues were in shock. Even more shocking, Uncle Phil's funeral revealed a bitter truth. The very faces who once called him family were nowhere to be seen on his final day. Will Smith, the son who shared the closest bond with him, didn't attend. Janet Hubert, the original Aunt Viv, chose silence. Could it be that behind those smiles on screen, silent rifts had always existed? That behind the spotlight, there were conflicts never spoken of? This wasn't just a funeral missing a few faces. It was a secret Hollywood never dared to admit. A place where friendship and betrayal had been buried for decades. Rewind the clock. Back to the very beginning of James Avery's story. In 1945, in Pughesville, Virginia, James LaRue Avery was born on November 27th into a working-class family. He grew up in Atlantic City, New Jersey, against the harsh backdrop of racial prejudice and deep social inequality. Avery knew all too well what it meant for a black man to have to work twice as hard just to be heard, just to be respected. As he came of age, he joined the U.S. Navy and even served during the Vietnam War. Those years in uniform didn't just give him discipline and resilience, they also revealed a burning desire within him. Instead of holding a gun, he wanted to hold a pen. He wanted to create. After leaving the military, Avery moved to San Diego, California. He began as a poet and screenwriter penning scripts for PBS educational programs. That foundation in literature and his sharp sensitivity to language would later allow him to breathe life into every line he delivered as an actor. Never one to stop there. Avery went on to study at the University of California, San Diego, earning a degree in drama and literature. But breaking into Hollywood was no red carpet affair for a middle-aged black man with a towering frame. Still, his commanding presence and that thunderous, resonant voice slowly carved out his place. By the 1980s, James Avery was showing up in hit TV series Hill Street Blues 1984, The Jeffersons' Amen. He even landed small film roles like Fletch 1985. But from 1987 to 1993, he gave his voice to one of animation's most unforgettable villains, Shredder in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. With that deep, booming tone, Avery turned Shredder into a defining antagonist of the 80s and 90s, forever tied to the childhoods of millions. In an interview, Avery once said, "When you're a black actor, you've got to work twice as hard. You don't just perform, you have to make them feel you force them to remember you." And that's exactly what he did. In 1990, James Avery was cast as Philip Banks in NBC's new sitcom, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. At first, Uncle Phil was just the strict uncle, the stern counterweight to the cocky, funny antics of young Will Smith. But within just a few episodes, Avery transformed Philip Banks into the heart of the entire show. Uncle Phil wasn't just a sitcom character, he became a symbol of the black middle class. A successful judge, tough, yet compassionate. Every time he lost his temper, audiences laughed. But every time he opened his arms, America held its breath. The most iconic moment, the episode, Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse Season 4. Will Smith breaks down in tears. "How come you don't want me, man?" before collapsing into Uncle Phil's arms. That embrace, that look of raw, fatherly love from Avery turned the scene into one of the most powerful moments in television history. Later, Will admitted that wasn't just acting. He truly cried in James Avery's arms, like a son clinging to his father. Through Uncle Phil, James Avery became the TV dad of an entire generation. He taught audiences about family responsibility and what it means to be a parent in the challenges of American life. But behind the spotlight, behind more than 140 roles, the laughter and the lessons, James Avery was still just a man of flesh and blood. And like every life story, his too could not escape the harsh truth of illness and time. Illness and a shocking death. James Avery had always been a strong man, towering, weighing nearly 260 pounds with a voice that was deep and commanding. But age and illness had begun to wear down his body. For years, Avery struggled with serious heart problems. Friends recalled how he would often complain of shortness of breath and exhaustion after filming. Yet with his resilient nature, he rarely spoke of it publicly. By the end of 2013, his condition worsened, forcing him to be hospitalized at Glendale Memorial Medical Center in California. Doctors recommended open-heart surgery, a dangerous but necessary procedure to prolong his life. During those hospital days, his wife Barbara Avery never left his side. Family and colleagues held on to hope, believing he would pull through. After all, Uncle Phil on screen had always been steady, unshakable, strong. But fate gave him no second chance. After surgery, Avery suffered severe complications. Despite the doctor's efforts, he took his final breath on December 31, 2013, as the world was preparing to count down and welcome the new year. He was 68 years old. His death came too suddenly. Just months earlier, he had still been attending small events, flashing that familiar warm smile, showing no signs of being gravely ill. Which is why news of his passing hit Hollywood like a thunderbolt. To his colleagues, Avery was more than a co-star. He was a teacher, a father figure, a mentor. To the public, he was the symbol of an entire generation. His death left behind an irreplaceable void. A void not only within the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air cast, but in the hearts of millions who had seen Uncle Phil as their real father on screen. But the pain didn't end with the news of his passing. It stretched into the days that followed as his family faced the final decision of how to lay their TV dad to rest. And from that moment, James Avery's funeral became a turning point, solemn, quiet, but also filled with controversy. Uncle Phil is gone. But there was no funeral for fans to say goodbye. When James Avery, the legendary Uncle Phil, passed away, millions of fans expected a grand funeral, a chance to light a candle to shed their final tears for the father figure they grew up with on screen. But the harsh truth left everyone stunned. There was no public funeral at all. The Avery family chose a deeply private farewell. His body was cremated soon after his passing, and his ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean. No casket, no wreaths, no crowd of grieving fans. Only the waves and the silent sky to hold his memory. That decision shook Hollywood. A star who had been a father to an entire generation vanished quietly in the end. No grave, no ritual, no public goodbye. For many fans, it felt like a double loss. Not only had they lost Uncle Phil, they had also lost the chance to say farewell. Understanding that both the public and his colleagues needed a place to honor Avery Alfonso Ribeiro Carlton, stepped forward to organize a memorial service on January 11, 2014 in Los Angeles. It was the only occasion when the cast of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air gathered to remember him. The January 11, 2014 memorial, who showed up and who didn't. The memorial was solemn, wrapped in reverence. A portrait of Avery in Judge Philip Banks's suit stood proudly at the front, while white candles and chrysanthemums lined the aisle, creating an atmosphere that was both warm and heavy with emotion. On stage, Alfonso Ribeiro Carlton led the service. His voice broke as he called Avery his second father, emphasizing that every important lesson in his life, from career to character, came from the years spent by Avery's side. Next, Tatiana Ali Ashley, now grown, held the microphone with trembling hands. He always made me feel loved, like a real daughter. The room fell silent. Many couldn't hold back their tears. Karen Parsons. Hillary laughed through her tears as she recalled the filming days. James was always the funniest storyteller, and his laughter filled the entire set. For her, Avery wasn't just stern like Uncle Phil. He was witty, warm, and always the one who could lift the mood for everyone. Then came Joseph Marcel Jeffrey with his crisp English accent. He declared Avery the soul of the show. Marcel recalled how whenever tension filled the set, Avery's presence alone restored seriousness and respect for the craft. Finally, Daphne Maxwell Reid, Aunt Viv from season 4 onward, tearfully paid tribute, calling Avery the most wonderful colleague, the one who supported her through the immense pressure of stepping into the role after Janet Hubert's departure. That memorial carried both laughter and tears, overflowing with memories. Yet two key faces were missing. Will Smith, the son most closely tied to Uncle Phil, the very center of The Fresh Prince, was completely absent. And Janet Hubert, the original Aunt Viv, was also nowhere to be seen. She only released a brief written statement to the press. To the public, their absence felt like a final punctuation mark, proof that old wounds had never been healed, not even on the day of farewell. Other familiar faces, like DJ Jazzy Jeff Jazz or Ross Bagley Little Nicky, were not mentioned by the media. Were they there or not, no one could say for sure. That silence left even more unspoken gaps in the memorial. The 2014 memorial should have been a sacred reunion, but the absence of its central figures turned it into an incomplete picture. Fans wept not only for the loss of James Avery, but for a harsh realization. The Banks family they once believed in may have only existed on screen and never in real life. Will Smith. The shocking absence. The biggest shock of the January 11, 2014 memorial wasn't the tears shed on stage. It was an empty chair. The chair that should have belonged to Will Smith, the son closest to Uncle Phil, the very soul of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The entire room froze when they realized Will wasn't there. The press put it bluntly. Will Smith was a no-show. Just 6 short words. But they cut like a knife into the hearts of millions of fans. They couldn't believe it. Everyone remembered that immortal moment on screen. Will breaking down in Uncle Phil's arms, sobbing as he cried out, "How come he don't want me, man?" A scene that brought the world to tears. But in real life, during the final goodbye, Will wasn't there to hold his TV father one last time. The news spread and outrage exploded. Fans screamed on social media Uncle Phil was there for Will. But when it was time for Will to be there for him, he disappeared. No schedule could ever be more important than the memorial. If Will chose not to attend, it means he turned his back on the Banks family. The fury only grew louder when just days later, paparazzi spotted Will Smith at a public event. For many fans, it felt like a slap in the face. People began to wonder, was the real reason truly about scheduling conflicts? Or were there deeper rifts Will didn't want to confront? Amid the storm, Will Smith posted just a single line on Facebook: "Every young man needs an Uncle Phil." A short, beautiful tribute. But it couldn't fill the void he left at the memorial. For many, those words felt more like a curtain drawn shut away of keeping silent rather than showing up in person. And so, a painful question echoed. If even Will Smith, the son the world believed in the most, wasn't there for Uncle Phil in the end, then when exactly had the Banks family fallen apart? If Will Smith's absence was a shock, Janet Hubert's silence was an old scar reopened, throbbing more painfully than ever. Janet Hubert's silence. And a scar that never healed. The 2014 memorial revealed a painful truth: the Banks family was never whole. The original Aunt Viv, who had been an icon of the show's earliest seasons, was nowhere to be found. Janet Hubert did not walk into the memorial hall. She didn't sit beside her former co-stars. She didn't share an embrace or shed a single tear in public. Instead, she released only a brief statement to the press. "I was shocked to hear the news. James was a wonderful actor to work with." A short sentence, yet one that resurfaced an entire history of turmoil between her and the cast. The bitter departure. In 1993, after 3 seasons, Janet Hubert, who had breathed life into a strong, intelligent, and fiery Aunt Viv, abruptly left the show. On screen, the role was recast with Daphne Maxwell Reid. But behind the scenes, her exit was anything but smooth. Hubert accused Will Smith of being the main reason. In interviews, she didn't hold back her criticism of him. He was an egotistical star. The whole set always had to revolve around him. "I was a grown woman with a family and a young child. I couldn't tolerate that kind of manipulation." When asked, Will didn't dodge the issue either. In a 1993 interview, he implied Hubert was difficult to work with. The conflict weighed so heavily on the production that NBC was forced to make a choice. The result, Hubert was replaced after season 3. Behind that decision were heated arguments and tense meetings, bits of which only leaked to the press at the time. But for Hubert, it became a wound that never closed. She later stated bluntly, "Will Smith ruined my career." In a 2011 interview, her words cut even deeper. "Will Smith destroyed my life. I will never forgive him." Will, on the other hand, stuck to his version. Without naming her directly, he consistently suggested Hubert was the one who didn't fit in with the cast. The two never reunited, never hugged, never reconciled. When Will joined the show in his early 20s, he was still a rapper with little acting experience. But thanks to his natural charisma and audience appeal, he quickly became the center of the series. Scripts began to revolve around him, which frustrated some of the veteran actors. James Avery, as a seasoned actor, often stepped in to defend the integrity of the production. He was both a teacher and an anchor, keeping Will grounded from being swept away by fame too soon. Still, the imbalance of power was always there. Will was the star, and the others had to accept being pushed to the background. Years after the show ended, fans began to notice that the cast rarely reunited in full. There were occasional small gatherings, but Janet Hubert's name was almost never mentioned. In one interview, Alfonso Ribeiro put it bluntly, "We don't keep in touch with Janet. That's the truth." His words confirmed to the public that behind the on-screen family warmth lay deep fractures. When James Avery, the spiritual pillar of the cast, passed away, fans hoped this would be the moment of healing. A memorial could have been the bridge, a chance to set grudges aside and come together to honor their shared father figure. But it never happened. Janet Hubert didn't show up. She didn't face Will. She didn't share the moment of reunion. To fans, her absence was bitter proof that the Banks family never truly existed off-screen. They commented with sorrow James Avery should have been the reason for them to forgive the past. But instead of an embrace, all we got was silence. A memorial that was never whole. Will wasn't there. Janet wasn't there. The so-called Fresh Prince family was just an illusion. That silence felt like another nail sealing the door shut, a door that had closed back in 1993. The 2014 memorial, which could have been a chance to heal instead, reopened old wounds and made them bleed all over again. The memorial was only the spark. The truth was, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had never been the perfect family. Behind the laughs and lessons the show hid, a backstage riddled with conflicts, tensions, and secrets buried for decades. Behind the laughs, the untold secrets of Fresh Prince Janet Hubert versus Alfonso Ribeiro, words that cut, even after 20 years. If the feud between Janet Hubert and Will Smith was the earthquake, then the verbal attacks between Hubert and Alfonso Ribeiro Carlton were the aftershocks exposing cracks in the Banks family that could no longer be hidden. In 2011, during an interview, Alfonso was asked if the cast still kept in touch with Janet Hubert. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't dodge. He flat out declared, "None of us keep in touch with Janet." That alone was enough to ignite a storm. A cold, blunt sentence that slammed shut the fragile door of reconciliation. It confirmed to the public that the original Aunt Viv had truly been cut off, erased from the collective memory of the cast. And Janet Hubert did not stay silent. She fired back with fury, aiming directly at Alfonso, a man she saw as nothing more than Will's sidekick. "I worked with him when he was 21 years old. He didn't know anything except following Will's lead." Her words weren't just rejection. They were a dagger aimed at the heart of the goofy, lovable Carlton in the audience's eyes. Hubert painted Alfonso as nothing more than Will's echo, a background laugh on set, and now an ally in keeping her out. Fans were stunned. The drama was no longer just between Will and Hubert. It spread across the cast, shattering the illusion of the Banks family as a picture of unity. But those sharp exchanges were only the surface. At the center of the Fresh Prince storm was Will Smith himself, the brightest star, the face of the show, and the one carrying a crushing weight few could imagine. Will Smith and the pressure of fame, the reluctant star. In 1990, Will Smith was just a 20-something rapper, inexperienced, walking into Hollywood with wide eyes and the innocence of a newcomer. He had never studied acting formally. He had never landed a professional role. And then, after just a few episodes, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air exploded into a cultural phenomenon, turning Will into a national star almost overnight. But the spotlight didn't just bring fame. It came with crushing weight. Writers began shaping the scripts around Will, making him the absolute center of every storyline. Other characters, from Aunt Viv to Carlton, Ashley, and Hillary, were gradually pushed into the background. This imbalance fueled resentment within the cast. For seasoned actors like Janet Hubert, watching a rookie fresh off the block receive so much favor was hard to swallow. Tension on set often stretched like a wire ready to snap, and Will himself. He wasn't as carefree as people assumed. The pressure to shine left him so anxious that he memorized entire scripts. Not just his own lines, but everyone else's too. In the very first episode, if you look closely, you can see his lips moving along with the other actors' lines. A tiny detail, but undeniable proof of his fear of being forgotten on stage. Will Smith did rise above it. From a novice rapper, he became a global superstar. But that victory didn't come peacefully. It came from a silent war, a struggle to prove himself, while watching the cracks within the Banks family grow deeper. And that pressure didn't just alienate cast members. It marked the beginning of a fracture that would never heal the disappearance of the original Aunt Viv Janet Hubert and the arrival of a second Aunt Viv. Aunt Viv, the second, an artistic fracture that never healed. When Janet Hubert left the show after season 3, the role of Aunt Viv was handed to Daphne Maxwell Reid. On the surface, it was just a change of actress. But in truth, it created an earthquake among fans. Janet Hubert had crafted Aunt Viv as a strong, intelligent, and proud black woman who stood as an equal to Uncle Phil, unafraid to argue fiercely and even go toe-to-toe with her husband to defend her views. She was a rare and sharp feminist figure in a 90s sitcom, one not easily replaced. Daphne Maxwell Reid's version was different. Her Aunt Viv was gentle, subdued, and almost secondary to the rest of the family. No more fiery debates with Uncle Phil. No more commanding presence that made audiences take notice. From then on, Aunt Viv became little more than a shadow in the Banks household. The shift sparked backlash. Loyal fans wrote letters to NBC complaining that the show had lost its feminist heartbeat. For years, forums and newspapers buzzed with debates comparing the two Aunt Vivs. To many, The Fresh Prince after season 3 was no longer the show they once loved. That change became an artistic fracture that never healed. It didn't just erase an iconic character, it left millions of viewers feeling betrayed. And above all, it cemented Janet Hubert's image as a victim, someone who lost her role, her chance, and her dignity in the public eye. But it wasn't just about art. Behind the scenes, Fresh Prince was clouded by bitter disputes over money. Rumors of money and contracts. Hollywood isn't fair. Janet Hubert has openly said her exit wasn't only about personal conflict, but also about being pressured into signing an unfair contract by NBC and the producers. In an interview, Hubert revealed bitterly, "I was locked into a contract. I couldn't take other jobs. And I couldn't support my family on that money." According to her, the salary she received never reflected the massive success of the show. While ratings soared and Will Smith rocketed into global stardom, Hubert was still struggling with restrictive terms and inadequate pay. Meanwhile, others, especially Will, benefited far more from the show's success. Rumors spread that Hubert had tried to renegotiate for fairer treatment. The result? The door slammed shut, and Aunt Viv was recast. For many fans, it was proof of injustice. Hubert wasn't just defeated in a personal feud. She was also a victim of a cold, unforgiving Hollywood system. NBC and the producers denied it, but the public wasn't convinced. On forums, many began calling Hubert the sacrifice that allowed Will Smith to shine. To them, this wasn't just personal drama, it was a textbook case of inequality in the entertainment industry. And while those wounds never healed, the divide within the cast became even more visible once the show ended. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air wrapped in 1996 after 6 successful seasons. To audiences, the Banks family was inseparable. But the truth behind the scenes was very different. There were small reunions in 2005, 2009, and 2011. But Janet Hubert was never there. The cast still met, still posed for photos. But the original Aunt Viv was permanently excluded. In stark contrast to the drama, James Avery never got caught up in scandal. He lived a simple life built on loyalty and love, leaving behind a legacy not of controversy, but of character and care. James Avery, A Private Life. In 1988, James Avery married Barbara Avery, an academic, who served as a dean at the prestigious Occidental College in Los Angeles. Unlike many Hollywood couples under the glare of constant scrutiny, their marriage lasted 25 strong years. No scandal, no drama. One unique detail, they had no children together. James never spoke publicly about why, and the press rarely touched the subject. But friends shared that he never lacked paternal love. To James, the kids on set, Tatiana Ali, Alfonso Ribeiro, even Will Smith were his spiritual children. He mentored them, guided them, and loved them as if they were his own. While many Hollywood stars chased fame and glitter, James Avery chose quiet evenings with his wife, books, and poetry, living a private but deeply meaningful life. James Avery was never a blockbuster superstar, but he built an impressive career with more than 140 roles. By the time of his passing in 2013, his net worth was estimated at around $3 to $4 million. Not a figure to rival Will Smith or Hollywood giants, but a testament to a long, steady career of dedication. His entire estate went to his devoted wife, Barbara Avery. She also carried out his final wish. His ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean, letting him dissolve into the waves and slip away as peacefully as he had lived. A cultural legacy. James Avery. In the eyes of Hollywood and America, James Avery left behind wealth for his wife and ashes for the sea. But his greatest legacy wasn't measured in millions. It was in values, love, kindness, integrity, and the timeless lessons he gave the world. On screen, he was the nation's father. In real life, he was the spiritual father of a generation. Stern, yet tender. And in that unforgettable moment, "How come he don't want me, man?" he turned a sitcom into a heartbreaking lesson on fatherhood that brought the world to tears. To Hollywood, James Avery was a symbol of perseverance and integrity. No scandals, no noise. He proved that to become a legend, you don't need flash. You only need to live true to your art and your character. To American audiences, Avery was more than an actor. He was a pop culture icon, the father figure every child wished for, a representation that made Black families feel seen on television. His passing on the very last day of 2013 marked a painful end to a chapter of childhood memories for millions. James Avery had no biological children, but he left behind millions of spiritual children, fans, colleagues, and all who grew up with Uncle Phil. And that is the immortal legacy no one can ever take away.